Hello and welcome to Week 12, Part 2 of EGM310, Water Resource Applications. In this lesson, we will learn about how we can use remote sensing to study different aspects of water. Remember that most electromagnetic radiation is absorbed within about 2 meters of the surface of water, depending on the wavelength. For infrared light, there is very little penetration below about half a meter, while for visible blue or green light, we can get penetration down to about 20 meters depth under the right conditions, normally calm, clear water. Suspended sediments or other particles or chlorophyll from phytoplankton will determine how much light is reflected and at what wavelengths. In thermal infrared wavelengths, we can also measure water temperatures, at least at the surface. In microwave wavelengths, we can also measure the surface roughness, at least relative to the signal wavelength. We can also learn about the composition of the water surface, so what other substances might be present. And on land, we can also measure soil moisture. We've discussed mapping water somewhat already last week. One of the ways that we can map the extent of water bodies is by calculating an index. The first way that we talked about is using the Normalized Difference Water Index, or NDWI. This is calculated by subtracting the near-infrared band from the visible green band and dividing by their sum. It works because most land surfaces have higher or similar values of reflectance in the near-infrared and green bands, while water has a significantly higher reflectance in the visible green. The NDWI will have positive values for water surfaces and negative or near zero values for almost everything else. Built-up areas can pose issues for estimating the NDWI though, which led to the development of a modified NDWI. In this, the shortwave infrared reflectance around 1500 nanometers is used rather than the near infrared. This helps reduce some of the noise and improve the extraction of water pixels. But this can pose significant issues with selecting a threshold, which led to the development of the Automated Water Extraction Index, or AWEI. The AWEI combines multiple bands, including the shortwave infrared, near infrared, and visible bands. Each of these methods requires choosing a threshold to classify water and not water. The images I've shown here are all presented using the default values, and as you can see, there are significant differences in the area of water mapped. So some care has to be taken in choosing these thresholds. To estimate water volumes, we need to know the surface elevation of the water body. We can do this using satellite altimeters. This could be a radar altimeter, as is used to map the ocean surface elevation. For smaller water bodies, we can also use laser altimeters, or LiDAR, including NASA's ice, cloud, and land elevation satellites. The example here shows ICESat-2 data. You can see that the laser can estimate the height of ocean waves and even measures bathymetry in shallower waters under the right conditions. If we also have a digital elevation model, or DEM, we can even estimate things like flood depth and volume by mapping the flood extent. We can intersect this with the elevation model to find the surface elevation of the water surface and subtract the initial elevation from that to estimate the depth. We can also estimate lake or reservoir volume in a similar way, especially if we already have the bathymetry. One example application of using remote sensing to study water is in the detection and observation of floods. In February 2020, Storm Dennis struck northern Europe, including the UK and Ireland. It brought high winds and significant rainfall, causing significant flooding over large parts of the UK. This image shows an area in Yorkshire with the River Wharfe flowing from the upper left to the lower right, meaning the River Ouse in the lower right part of this image. This is a false color composite from summer 2020, and it gives you an idea of what the area looks like under normal conditions. This image is from February 2020, and it shows significant flooding along the River Wharfe and its tributaries. To give an idea of scale, the widest sections of flooding here are about 500 to 600 meters. As you can see, optical sensors are also weather dependent. Much of the flooded extent in this subimage is obscured by clouds, which makes mapping the full extent of the flooding difficult. By using SAR sensors, on the other hand, we can map floods under all weather conditions, as clouds are almost entirely transparent in the microwave portion of the electromagnetic spectrum. In addition to mapping the extent of water bodies, we can also learn about their chemical and biological makeup. One common application of this is in estimating chlorophyll A concentration using the difference in a reflectance between the visible blue and green bands. This is often used as a proxy for phytoplankton concentration. The example shown here is a portion of a Landsat image showing the southern coasts of Portugal and Spain. You can see the variations of color along the coast here. Some of this variation is due to sediments and turbidity of the water and is not directly related to chlorophyll or algal blooms. Using certain sensors, such as a MODIS, we can estimate what is called the fluorescence. This is the electromagnetic radiation that is actually produced by the microorganisms in the water. We can see an example of this shown here. On the left, we have the chlorophyll concentration estimated by the CWIFS satellite, and it shows a red tide off the southern coast of Florida. This is a type of algal bloom that poses a threat for marine life due to the toxic conditions it can produce. Notice that not all areas of high chlorophyll concentration are due to high concentrations of algae, though. Most of the signal along the coast is related to sediments. The fluorescence, shown in the upper right corner of the image, removes a significant portion of this non-biological signal. We see the extent of the algal blooms clearly here, but the sediment-related signal has been significantly diminished. In addition to chlorophyll concentration, we can also estimate other quantities of organic particles that are suspended in the water column. Generally speaking, we refer to these as colored dissolved organic matter, or CDOM. These are molecules that have been leached from decaying organic matter that change the color of water. We can relate these to dissolved organic carbon or other nutrients to help us study water quality and other aspects of water science. More generally, we can also estimate the total suspended matter. This is all of the sediments and organic matter that is suspended in the water column. Normally, we estimate these quantities using empirical relationships derived from in situ observations. Very often, someone will go out with a boat and take a number of different measurements. We can then compare these measurements to our remote sensing observations, working out a mathematical relationship between the field measurements and the remote sensing data in order to estimate the quantities in unmeasured areas and at different times. Another useful application of remote sensing data is detecting and monitoring oil spills. Optical systems can help detect thin films of oil on the water, also known as sheens, as well as thicker layers of oil known as slicks. Typically, the best results are found using wavelengths between 300 and 450 nanometers, which are not always detected by optical systems. The more recent Landsat and Sentinel-2 instruments detect in these wavelengths, but earlier instruments did not. Because of the way that oil interacts with the water surface, we can detect slicks using active microwave sensors as well. Thicker deposits of oil dampen waves, changing the texture of the water surface. You can see examples of this shown here. The ocean surface is somewhat rough and bright, while oil slicks appear darker and smoother. And sometimes we can also see the ships that are responsible for the oil spills. In this lesson, we have discussed how remote sensing provides a powerful tool for monitoring water resources. Visible and infrared sensors or optical systems can be used to map the extent of water bodies as well as monitor sediments and water quality. With altimeters, we can get water levels and calculate the volume of some water bodies, in particular reservoirs used as water sources or hydropower. Microwave sensors can be used to detect and monitor floods or oil spills and other sources of pollution. Once again, you can read more about the concepts we've covered in this lesson in the textbooks, Chapter 8, Section 7 of Lillesand, Kiefer, and Chipman, or Chapter 19 of Campbell and Wynne. I've included links to 2 websites that go into a bit more detail about mapping ocean color and water quality, as well as 2 different videos that cover similar topics. That's all for this lesson. I hope you found it interesting, and if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to email me or post in the discussion forum on Blackboard. Bye!